Hey, so you can go ahead and turn in your Bible to 2 Corinthians. It's chapter 8. Chapter 8. We've been, interestingly, throughout this series, we've been jumping back into the church in Corinth. And here we're going to see Paul addressing the church there. Before we get there, I want to set it up, as always, context. In Acts 20, we see this incredible story that you could go to sometime, perhaps this week, later on today. Paul's at the end of his third missionary journey, and he's about to go from Miletus, is where he is, and he's going to travel back to Jerusalem. He knows he's heading there. He's got to go back there, and he is on the beach. This is really kind of a cinematic, kind of dramatic moment. And these Ephesian elders have gathered around him, and they're praying over him, and they're weeping together over the fact that Paul's now going to leave. And he's already told them, he's got this prophetic word, but he also has a hunch. If I go to where Jesus was crucified and where he rose again, and I'm going to go and proclaim the message that this has happened. And he says, if I go there and do this, he already knows this now after years of ministry. This is not going to go well for me, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so he's already sorrowful that I may not see you guys again. And he's not going to see them again. And so what he says as he's heading out, he says this: in all things I have shown you, in the ministry that we've done, that by working hard in this way, we must, here it is, here's what he comes to. We must help the weak and remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he himself said, it is more, everybody say this, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Now, this is a unique phrase from Jesus, quote from Jesus, one that's found outside of the Gospels, and it's not found in the Gospels, but this is a word they'd heard from him, and it was known that Jesus said it's better to give than to get. Now, most of us, the other unique thing about this is it's counterintuitive, right? Because think about it. I think we believe this in theory, but do we really believe that it's better to give than to get? Because it's good to get, right? It is really good to get things. But what we know enough, I think most of us know, and I think most people kind of generally know this, whether you're Christian or not, that when we give our time, to someone, in fact, there's been science done of dopamine and science of generosity. When you give your time to people, you listen well, you had a meeting with someone, you felt like it really helped them today. You kind of feel good about that, right? Most of us want to be generous, is my point. Most of us, in fact, I'm believing this, a body of believers here, and particularly in our church, most of us want to be more generous. This is what hit me today, and my focus this year is to be kind of disciplined, selfless living is what I want to do. In your right moment, right? We've been worshiping the Lord, and in these right moments where we're like right-sized, I'm going to get my life, it's why you're here today, I'm going to get my heart set on Christ. Isn't it true? Don't you really want to give your life away? Don't you really know? We had Richard Prince's funeral yesterday. Some of you know Richard Prince, one of the great prince of a man, one of the most amazing men I've ever known in my life. He gave himself away. He didn't have much. We sang about it earlier, but he gave all that he had away. And I leave moments like that throughout my ministry. I'll leave, a funeral and go home, and whether it was back, when my kids were little or whatever. And I'm going to be a better dad as a result. I want to be a better husband. I want to give my life away. I want to be a better pastor, all the things. And I'm believing that you're here today and you really have this desire to be more generous. You're giving of your time this morning, and you want to leave this place. I really want to give my life to the Lord, which means we're going to give our time, we're going to give ourselves away to people. And already the tension in our minds is, man, Jeff, I am busy, right? And I want to really help us all to get focused. And I guess my heart today is, don't waste your life. Don't waste your life putting all your time, on yourself, giving to yourself everything, all the things. Instead, give yourself away. So 2 Corinthians chapter 8, we're going to look at verses 1 through 15. All right, this is an amazing passage. And we're going to see here, the way I'm going to break this down, some of you have your dwell journal. with you, or you can take notes here. We're going to break it down. We're going to see the ingredients of generosity first. We're going to see, secondly, the example of generosity. And then we'll see the purpose of generosity. We'll go through all of these, the ingredients of generosity first, okay? Now, again, you got to put this in context. You probably didn't show up thinking about the church in Corinth. You're like, I don't even know where this is. You know, the Achaean Peninsula that comes down. If you know Greece, there's all kinds of islands, craziness going on. Anybody ever been to Greece? Anybody in here been to Greece? Oh, come on. I've never been there, but would love to. Y'all know what I'm talking about then. But there's three different groups going on. You got to understand this in this passage or it won't make sense. He's writing to the church in Corinth, okay? Challenging them, by the way, to give, to help support Christians in Jerusalem who are experiencing a severe famine. And all of these groups are being persecuted. That was just the way it went for Christians in this era, in this time of the history of the church. And so and often, you know this, persecution removes you from social interaction and engagement in culture. So persecution, yes, you're going to be poor. That's how it plays out. So all of these groups are poor, even the Corinthian church, though they have more than most. He is going to appeal to them to commit to giving to the Jerusalem church, which they'd already done. So he's really coming back to them to say, come on, finish, let's go. Are you in for real? And he actually has sent Titus, we're going to see, who actually probably has this letter. And he sent him to him to go, y'all still in on this? You know, kind of a thing. And he's going to then point to, if you've ever read this story, he's going to point to the church in Macedonia as an example who have already given big time. And he's going to say, look what they've done. And these folks are a lot more impoverished than you are. Extreme, what we would call abject, okay, crippling kind of poverty. And we've seen that in our ministries around the world, and even here in large degree in parts of Dallas. So he's saying, but I want to show you what they have done. This is an amazing passage. So here we go. There's three subpoints under the first point, all right? If you want to, if you're left brain and you're tracking with me. First is we're going to see the circumstances, their circumstances, all right? The second is resources and then devotion that they've had. Here we go, verse 1. We want you to know, brothers and sisters, is really the language there, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, all right, we're going to keep going, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty, there's the word, abject poverty, have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. Now, all of this is counterintuitive. Okay, but I want you to see in verse 1, he uses this word, grace of God. Grace, you might know this word in Greek is charis, okay? Favor, gift, that's what it is. A grace gift, that's redundant, but it's a grace. If it's not a gift, it's not grace. But it's a grace gift, he says, that they've been given. So he's going to use this word grace 10 times throughout this portion of the book. And it's really interesting. He keeps talking about this opportunity to give as a grace gift and generosity as a gift. When's the last time, this hit me this week, when's the last time you prayed for, Lord, give me the gift of generosity? Give me the grace of generosity. See, it's a gift from God. That's a legit prayer. That, where we're wrestling today with how can I give more of my time? How can I give more of myself away to the Lord by serving others? Give me the grace to do it because I'm struggling to do it. That's a great, great prayer. So oftentimes we look at our circumstances, certainly in regard to giving, and we go, well, I only have this much, so I don't have a lot. And when I got more, I'm going to give more. It's been proven, of course, if you have a little and you don't give a little, when you have a lot, you're not going to give a lot. It's not going to happen. We're always waiting for our circumstances to change. And what Paul is showing us here is, wow, in their abject poverty, they actually had the grace of giving, and they gave big time. In fact, look at this, catch this equation, where it says again in verse 2, for in a severe test of their abundance of joy, check that out, abundance of joy, and their extreme poverty equaled, and overflowed in wealth of generosity. Now we, in the modern West, we're blown away by this. How many of y'all have ever been on one of our mission trips or served maybe in the city? How many of you have been among the poor? Like even for a moment, yeah. Every time we go on a trip, or even, I could name places here in Dallas, whether it's, South Dallas and Vickery and East Dallas. There's many places where we can go in pockets. I was seeing on the news, where we have these food deserts right here in our city. But you can go to places and realize, wow, what happens every time we go on these trips of places that we've already seen this morning. When we come back, the team is always talking about, man, they had so much joy. They had so much joy. They have nothing, and they have so much joy. That's always the takeaway for us, isn't it? Those of you that know what I'm talking about. And now that does two things. One, it exposes where we think joy ought to come from, right? It's like, I can't believe it. They have nothing, and yet they're happy, and we have so much. And yet so many of us don't have the joy that they have. That's always an amazing thing for us. So what do we do about that? Well, one thing you can do and should do is go among the poor. Get involved in ministries that place us in position to see and experience that. Jesus said, when you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. Right? So he says, he so identifies with the poor and those who don't have much, when you go among them, he says, I'm there. How many want to be where Jesus is? He is there. You go into that space and you realize, wow, it's tangible, friends. I'm telling you it's tangible. That Christ is there. And so what happens here is we need to get exposed a bit more. Because those of us with much, and I know this is always relative. The wealthiest person in here is like, well, I'm not Elon Musk, but I got a lot. And yet it's always relative in our context. And so we need to go among those who are needy. So we see these circumstances. I guess the point there is that your circumstances don't have to be where I got it all together, now I can give something. And we also see in the mix, the ingredient, okay, think of a cake. We've got our circumstances, we've got our resources, all right? And everybody has something. Look at verse 3. For they gave according to their means. Okay, so they gave what they had, is what he's saying. As I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord. Now, a couple of principles here. Generosity is not measured by wealth, but by willingness, okay? Now, I could say, it's not amount, but it's your heart behind it. And that's true. However, if you have a lot and you give a little, then there's probably not a lot of heart behind it, right? Not a lot of grace in response to grace or the gift of grace to others. There's also this other ultimate compliment that he gives them. He says they gave above their means. They gave beyond what they actually thought they could give or what it seemed they could give. And here's a good place to just remind us, and I know you're like, I didn't come to church to hear a sermon on giving, frankly. But here's the thing. I'm talking about total life generosity. They gave of their time and what you can do. I want to challenge you today. How are you spending your time serving others? How are you spending time in ministry, giving your life away? I went to Getaway Weekend as well last weekend, and it was amazing. We had 60 plus adults who were there, giving of their time. I see some of y'all here in the room, giving the weekend away to our students to raise up this next generation. What about you? I'm going to point to them as examples, right? Can you give a weekend away? Maybe you ought to go among the poor. You need to go on one of our upcoming mission trips. Can you serve our kids? You love music? Serve our children. In our choirs, do you love kids? You can serve kids. Whatever your talent or passion is, there's a place for you to serve. Do you like students? You could hang out with students. Do you have a home? You could open your home to a crew group like many of you have. That's a gift of grace that you've given to us all. Many of us love older people. You could join our flower ministry or serve in hospitals. There's all kinds of ways that you can give. One of the ways that many of us can give is, sure enough, through our devotion to God and the resources he's given us. So what we see here, we see a generosity of circumstance, resource, and devotion is the last one. Look at verse, and under this first point, look at verse 4. Begging us earnestly. They were begging us for the favor, okay? That's the word grace, by the way. There it is again. That's charis. For the grace, he keeps referring it to that way, of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this, not as we expected, he says, but they gave themselves first. There's the word. They devoted themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. So look, when you first give your heart to Jesus, he starts to change your heart so that then you want to enter into the favor, the grace of being able to give to others. And this word, taking part, interesting phrase. Another Greek word you probably know, koinonia. You might know that. It means fellowship. Sharing together is what it is. He says they took part. They shared together in this need that we have for the relief of the saints. So you have all these Christians coming together, multiple churches coming together to help these people in need, because that's what churches do, and that's what we do big time as a church family. And often we lead the way. You know, there's so many ministries around our city, and if you dig deep enough, you go, oh yeah, Park City started that. Oh, there's that one. Park City started. Brother Bill's. Oh, Park City started that. Men of Nehemiah. Oh, Park Cities. Yeah, they were. Oh, Cornerstone, as Chris said. Oh, we've been there for years, you know. And it's happened. Many churches have been started by people in our congregation. And I say all that as your pastor, you know, not, you know, sorry, but not pridefully, I hope, but it can have a spiritual proud of you. I'm so grateful for you and how the Lord has used our church. It's just amazing how God is at work in our church and how we're always others focused. And I just want to get us back to that. And like Paul is doing here, as he's celebrating the Macedonians, I want to celebrate you. I just pause and say, praise God for every person in our church right now. If you serve an hour holding babies among us to make sure that they feel safe and loved here. If you work with our preschoolers every Sunday, you give an hour of all the hours in a week. You give that time. I praise God for you. And those of you who open your homes to your Connect groups, those of you, I was talking to one of our Connect group leaders this morning, been studying all week long, preparing his heart to be ready to bring this message God laid on his heart with our young couples today. And this is over and over again. And this is not to guilt anyone, but as Paul is doing, to point to others that I could point to say, what is your ministry? Where are you giving your time to others? And all of us wrestle with this who love Jesus. We want to give more. And just let that tension, it's a tension to manage. It's not one to resolve. It's one to say, I want to manage this tension. I want to do more. I want to do more. And so I just ask you to continue to seek the Spirit and let him speak to you and let him give you this favor. So, you know, what excuses do you offer? Because friends, I could tell you the first thing to go, when we get busy, the first thing to go is our spiritual disciplines and devotion to the Lord. I don't have time to read my Bible. I don't have time to pray. I don't have time for all these ministries you're talking about, Jeff. I mean, I'm feeling like I didn't come here to be challenged like this. I don't have time. Preaching to the choir perhaps. I don't have time to go to church every week. I don't have time to go on a mission trip. Like, what is that, a week out of the year? I don't have time. I don't have time to help at VBS. Not even a week out of the year. The whole year. I don't have time. I don't have time for that. Friends, you cannot give your heart and soul to the Lord without giving him your time. It's impossible. And so the greatest thing, often we think, man, the greatest thing we want to cling to is our resource, our money. No, it's time. It's time. And that's what people need the most. Paul's entire focus here is on the grace of God that has changed our lives and how we respond to that. So we've laid out the ingredients of circumstance, our resources, our devotion. So the question, often asked, a legitimate question, how much should I give? Whether it be time, right? We wrestle with that. Whether it be our money, how much? But before how much or even what, the question is why. And now he gets to the heart of it all. Look at the example of generosity. The example of generosity in verse 6. Accordingly, we urged, here's what I was telling you earlier, we urged Titus that as he had started, so he should complete among you this act of grace. So he sent Titus to rekindle their commitment. In verse 7, but as you excel in everything, in faith and speech and knowledge, in all earnestness, and in our love for you, see that you excel in this act of grace also. So if the Macedonians excelled in generosity, it seems the Corinthian church excelled in grace. And now he says, let this grace turn into action. And so he's saying, again, they've already committed is what's happened, the story we know. And he's saying, let's finish. And again, look at verse 8. Let's keep going. I say this not as a command, but to prove by the earnestness of others that your love is also genuine. I hope you've heard this you would hear this from leaders, pastors who are challenging you. I hope you hear, we don't command the tithe, or something like that. Instead, we appeal to the grace of God in you and your love for him and love for others. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that, for this purpose, you, by his poverty, might become rich. I love this. He appeals to the ultimate example of love and grace that should be our motivation, right? So how much should we give? Jesus teaches us that if you get your heart right, the amount will take care of itself. If you are abiding in him and walking with him and seeking him daily, his spirit in you, he's going to prompt you to say, I'm going to give my time to that person today. I don't have time. I'm going to do it anyway. I don't have time for that. I've got other things I need to do. I'm going to do that. It's a tension to manage, and it is a constant tension in the life of a disciple, always. And I am so grateful. I'm going to embarrass her. I get to see this every single day as I live with the most servant-oriented person that I know. Stacy, we have, some of y'all know we've got grandkids, we got parents, we're taking care of, we're in that place. And I just watch her, she doesn't have time, but she's going to be there to serve. I don't have time to do it. She's going to be there. And so there's this constant tension, and it's great to have friends, I don't know if it's a spouse or a friend or a roommate, to say, man, I'm wrestling with this, and to encourage each other to press on, to continue to bless others. And Paul then offers us here this gospel in financial terms. He says, though he became poor so that we might become rich. You all know this. This is the great exchange, right, of the gospel that we talk about all the time. This is it. And then he says in verse 10, and in this matter, it's really wild. We're dropping in on this letter to specific people, right? In this matter, I give you my judgment. He says, here's the summary. This benefits you who a year ago, okay, this is history here, not only to do this work, but also to desire to do it. You started this a year ago. So now finish doing it as well, so that your readiness in desiring it may be matched by your completing it out of what you have. So you can hear what he's saying. Hey, finish what you started. And I want to offer this. Ministry is challenging. I think it's in part, let's be honest, it's part why some of us don't dive in. I guess I could give my time, like maybe I could give an hour a week by serving preschoolers. I heard they had some needs there. I want to love kids. I just don't know. I got a lot going on. So we say no, and we don't do it. And then others of us, we're in ministry for a minute. I did that for a moment. Whew, that got messy. I was in that connect group. There's some weird people in there. I had to pull out. I'm not weird, but there were some weird folks in there. Whatever it is. Y'all, ministry is messy. This is why Paul's admonition is a challenge to us. If you're going to serve the Lord, if you're going to go in, it's going to get hard. At some point, you'll get crosswise with people. At some point, you're going to be tired. at some point you're going to say, hey, maybe this week, sure enough, I need somebody to cover for me. I need help. I need help. There's going to be those moments, but watch what happens here. He's going to show us how we come in this together. We're shoulder to shoulder. We're not alone in this. So we see the ingredients, we see the example, and we see now the purpose. Okay, we're going to land with this, and we're going to have a time where we respond to the Lord before we're done here today because of his grace for us. The purpose of generosity is how we close here. Verse 12. For if the readiness is there, it is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. He's saying, don't worry about what you don't have. You bring what you have. And the Macedonians are examples of this. For I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need, so that their abundance may supply your need, that there may be fairness. So what we see here, okay, he's talking about need. The purpose of giving, this is self-evident, is to meet a need, specific need. And the challenge for us today, let the Spirit speak to you. What specific needs do you see in those around you, or maybe in your sphere of influence or passion or gifting, even in the church, that you could meet? What's the specific need? The Lord's called you here to meet that need. A member of this church, and I say this oftentimes to new members, writing letters this week to a host of new members who are joining over the next couple days. Weeks, we're going to present. I say, gosh, we're a better church because you're here. Something was not happening because you're here. And if you're not serving today, friends, listen, something is not happening. And the Lord said, I gave you that gift. That's why you're here. So I want you to really think through this. And what he's saying is, we're shoulder to shoulder. Your supply, okay, your surplus is matching my deficit. And then my deficit is met by your surplus in my life. That's the nature of the church and the needs that we have. And again, I give us high marks here in regard to meeting specific needs. Our mission committee, some of you are on it here in this room, our staff and others. I mean, we don't swoop in like the American church is often known to do and say, hey, we know what you need and we're here to rescue you. Instead, we go in and we say, okay, what are your needs? And we listen is what we do. We listen in and we say, how can we serve you? And then Paul closes this out in verse 15 with, as it is written, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Where is that written? He's referencing the story in Exodus of manna, where God provided and everybody had the same. And so it all levels out. So I want to close our time by saying this. I think the greatest reason we give, of course, is in response to God's grace, right? But here's another thing that giving does for us. And this is in regard to giving money, clearly, but also giving our time. And it's this: giving changes us. If you're here today, and again, in our right minds in worship context like this, you're like, I want to be like Jesus. A disciple is one who's constantly becoming like Christ, right? I think, probably the greatest way that you become like Jesus, in a word, give. You give your life away like he did. And you do it in various forms like we've talked about today. So giving sanctifies us. Giving forms us. Again, you can't give your life to God without giving him your time. And so I just want to let all of this, let the Spirit fall upon us as we finish our time together. I'm going to ask the crew to come on out. Han and the band and such are coming out because we're going to sing together. And we have time. You don't have to rush out to sing a song that really is a wonderful song that we're learning these days about the grace of God. And so I don't know how this message has hit you. I've wrestled with, Lord, just let the Spirit speak. But I know that it has, because his word never comes back void. And I just want to land on that thought that Paul gives us, that out of his poverty, we have become rich. And out of that, we respond to him by giving all that we are to him. And as local and members of this local church, to give to this church your time and your energies and your talents. In what ways is he calling you to do that?